We have a quorum, Madam Vice Chair.
Awesome, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I will be your host today. Gary's not able to attend. So now we've certified a quorum. We'll start with item number 2, approval of April 22nd meeting. Anybody have any changes, or can we entertain a motion in a second, please?
This is Ed Collins. I'll move to accept the minutes.
Awesome, thank you, Ed. And second? Don't be shy. Okay, I'll go ahead and second. If I can get a motion or a vote, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. We'll go to item 3, which is action item discussion and recommendation on the regional freight plan. Nirav, you're going to lead this one for us?
Yeah, Emily, thank you. Next slide. So this is just to talk about, to continue the item that we talked about last month. We're just going to talk about all that we've learned in developing the freight plan that started in December 2022. I really want to thank the consultant team that worked very hard to create a very comprehensive, very thorough report that I'm glad that y'all had a chance to read and provide comments on. So thank you for providing those comments. And today we're just going to do a quick recap of the assets that we have in the region, how e-commerce has affected the surface transportation network in our region, and go over some of the recommendations that came out of the report. There were 81 in total in 4 different categories, and split into short, medium, and long-term recommendations. I will not go over all 81, so keep it getting short, and then we'll go over some project gap analysis to look at future areas for freight projects. Next slide. To begin with, we'll just start to talk about the non-highway assets that we have in this region. We have pipelines, airports, and railroads. We have about 450 miles of railroads, 250 which are operated by Union Pacific, 1 airport that is required to provide freight data to the federal government. That's not to say that other airports in our region do not utilize or have freight traffic, but Austin, because of its size and the length of its runways, is the only one required to provide that data. The one thing on this map that you do not see is a intermodal freight hub providing for a transfer from rail to truck. Right now, any goods that come into our region by rail have to be taken to either Dallas, San Antonio, or Houston, then trucked over here, which does a lot for increasing the lead time for delivery. We used to be known as the pass-through region, but more and more, we are a region of destination. So one of the recommendations that we will talk about is studying potential locations for such a facility. Next slide. However, what we also have in this region are highways. 90% of the freight moved in this region is by truck, and those trucks utilize highways. In our region, we have about 850 miles of 850 miles on the Texas highway freight network. That's every interstate, freeway, expressway, basically every limited access facility in our region. Next page, next slide. And on those highways, what we also lack is truck parking. Trucks need to park for a variety of reasons, whether to stage, load, unload, to meet their mandatory rest requirements for the federal government. And in this region, there is not a single public truck parking location. Caldwell County recently got funding, a RAISE grant to build such a location, but that is not built yet. So it is definitely a deficiency within our region that we look to address in our recommendations. Next slide. And so we'll now shift to e-commerce. The last time we had a freight plan adopted by CAMPO, it was in 2008. Back then, the term e-commerce was not something that any of us were probably familiar with. Now in our region, we have 15 locations, 10 of them owned by Amazon, so either warehouses or fulfillment centers that are growing so fast that they sometimes show up faster than even Google Maps can keep track of them. We were able to look at the activity level by gathering streetlight data at each facility. And then one of the things that we wanted to note from the report was that the more the region grows, the likelihood is that there's going to need to be more space devoted for these facilities, which means going to be an increase in traffic, an increase in activity going in and out. And there's one analysis that we saw that a fulfillment center can sometimes take up to 3 times as much space as a traditional retail store. Next slide. We also did a examination of trips by time into and out of those locations. For the trips by year, you can see the spike in 2020. Understandable, but we're not quite sure why there was a dip in 2021 and 2022. That might be due to the sample size that Streetlight has. But on the right there, the trips by month, that's a little bit more understandable. You have your spikes in February and April, probably for Valentine's Day and Easter. There's a small spike in August for back to school shopping, and then starting in October is the holiday shopping season. Slide. We also can look at trips by time of day, and about 3/4 of trips, trips for e-commerce are taken between midnight and 7 p.m. All this data we think can be very important considering not only where to put your fulfillment centers or your warehouses when those applications are made, but also looking at transportation impact analyses and signal timing. Next slide. So we'll now get into the recommendations. We'll start with the infrastructure category. Just one I want to focus on was to take on a regional study for truck parking. The state already did one in 2020, but that just kind of looked at where truck parking was deficient throughout the state. The purpose of this study would be to be more focused on the region, yes, but also to identify those locations that are suitable for truck parking and where they would be. Next slide. And the other for technology, we're already working to evaluate how freight network technologies connect with the ITS architecture. We're already doing the ITS architecture is underway. I've already instructed the consultants for the freight plan, and we're doing the ITS architecture to discuss where that nexus lies and how one affects the other. Next slide. And for safety, we're recommending that we examine technology to increase safety at our rate for all of our at-grade rail crossings. In our region, we have 46 with 46 with 16 in Williamson County and 11 in Baskin County. So anything that we can do to improve safety at those crossings is paramount. Next slide. And then finally, for land use and economic development, I mentioned earlier that this region does not have an intermodal freight facility, so initiating a rail access study to look into whether this region could support such a facility is something that we would recommend. Next slide. And the last 2 slides I have is just to look at the gaps of where we have, where we're lacking projects to address freight challenges in our region. The black shows that the vast majority of the mileage on the Texas Highway Freight Network not only have projects that have been identified by TxDOT, but are also fully funded. There are other sections of the Freight Highway Network that either have projects that are partially funded or have projects identified but have no funding. There's only very few, or not very few, but there's only a limited number of miles that have either no projects or no funding, and most of those are on the east side of our region. Next slide. So our final slide is kind of looking at where those priority corridors are, and again, they're on the east side, which makes sense given that when you're looking at connectivity to Houston, where you're looking at the level of truck volume and the need for increased safety, and of course the fact there's very few projects identified in that part of the region. We're identifying those as priority corridors for the next set of freight projects. And think that's my last slide. Next, please. So staff went to the board last month for an information item. We're going to request the Technical Advisory Committee make a recommendation to the board to adopt the freight plan. And we look to get that freight plan adopted in June meeting was canceled. So the June meeting was canceled, so in August or September. Yeah, August or September, we'll get that adopted by the policy board. That's my presentation. Thank you for your attention. Look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Narev. Is there, do you have a question? See your hand up.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, I just may want to reiterate. Well, so thank you for that summary of there's 81 different policy recommendations. That's a tall order to kind of keep going, and that's where I think some formation of a freight committee might be in order. Made that suggestion at the last meeting. It just said to get everybody together. So because if you have the plan, but you need people to implement it and to get those actors, those cities, the freight community, and all together to figure out the best way to move forward. The other thing is I know there's a longer term plan, though it has recommendations from 1 to 10 years. I think it maybe doesn't recognize as strongly as I would about what's going to happen with I-35 when that construction starts between North Austin and South Austin. How are we going to communicate with all those people who travel that corridor, which includes all these truckers and everything. It's going to impact everybody's life, and maybe there's some existing efforts that are underway that that CAMPO and others, and by inviting the freight people to also become involved in some of those efforts that are being done by the city of Austin and I think Travis County. If I was to make a recommendation about adoption of this, I would also include a recommendation to look into the creation of a freight committee. They do have it in the Dallas-Fort Worth MPO as well as in the Houston area. And maybe we can learn from some of their experiences about how to have a committee that can provide some productive input into everything that we do on transportation. Thank you.
So thanks, Ed. We will certainly bring up the idea of a freight committee to the board. On the board can create subcommittees or committees. Then in terms of the I-35 construction and how detour options and other information can be transmitted to freight vehicles, drivers, TxDOT along with City of Austin and Travis County and CTRMA and CAMPO have formed what's called the Construction Partnership Program. The purpose of that program is one, to coordinate closures and detours among the agencies in advance, but also to send that information out to the traveling public, whether that's movement by passenger vehicle or by freight. So the district office is actually working right now at the request of the commission to develop an app that will have that information in it. In addition to that, the district office has already made contact with Google, Waze, and other providers, traffic information providers like that. And they are setting up the framework to transmit construction information out for that. And that's something the commission sort of specified early on. So that we should probably see an app. If somebody's on from the district wants to talk about that, I appreciate that. We should probably see an app. Forgot what time frame the commission said. I want to say it was, I thought it was this fall. I thought it was like August, September, the time frame the commission said.
Yeah, Ashby, I believe we're on track for that. That was actually a part of the mitigation that we put into the FEIS ROD for Central. So it's in the works.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you for the explanation. Just didn't realize, what was going on, but that seems very comprehensive. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Cole, you have a comment or question?
Yes, I'm curious to hear more about the priority map and the designations, and kind of along these same lines of discussion about I-35 and the construction period, and perhaps why SH-130 isn't being shown at least at the same priority level as I-35 for that reason.
Bill, can you go back to the which is my slide, please? Yeah, so again, the corridors were selected basically based on which had identified projects and funding. And then when you look at that versus, it was a totality of one. So when you look at what areas of the region do not have any priority, any projects, that would probably give a little bit more weight than, something like 130, which has projects identified and funded. That's probably the difference there. If it's, so does that answer the question?
Yeah, so it's not a
So,
priority
Cole,
rate.
I want to make sure I understand the question. So were you thinking that these priority corridors were priorities because of I-35 construction or something different?
No, my interpretation of the map is that these are priority freight corridors. And so it would appear that 130 is low priority compared to I-35, which is a medium priority. And why 130 wouldn't be considered at least the same as I-35, as it's intended or could be intended to be a relief.
Again, that's mostly because 130 is already undergoing construction for projects. So if you're looking at areas of the region that don't have any identified projects or funded projects, that those sections just for this, which is for more long-term projects, that would just be in the next round of project selection. That'll probably be a little bit more given higher priority for those new projects.
I think that's a better way. That's a better way of saying it's priority projects on these corridors, not priority corridors.
Right, they're not priority. Yeah, it's not saying that
It's not.
It's lower priority than I-35.
Yeah, and we can work on a better name and description for that. We'll make sure in the plan, Cole, because it's not that the corridor itself is a lower priority for freight. Just that, like Nira was saying, lower priority in the sense of projects on identifying new projects on 130, because there are projects and they are funded.
Yeah, I understand now.
And that helps me as well.
But I can see how that could be seen that way. So we'll
fix that.
Yeah, we'll update that.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Cole. Anybody else have any other questions or comments? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
This is Ed Collins. I recommend approval of the freight plan as proposed.
Awesome. Thanks, Ed. And second?
Tom Godala. I'll second.
Thank you, Tom. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Anybody opposed? Thank you so much. Motion passes. So
Thank you.
moving to the information section, we're going to take things out of a little bit different order. We're going to start with a presentation on bicycle and pedestrian facilities inventory update. And Nick, I think you're walking us through that.
Yes,
Thank you.
laptop around just. Slides I did. Thank you, everybody. So I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about a key GIS resource that CAMPO maintains, which is the bicycle and pedestrian facilities inventory. It was a part of the 2045 Regional Active Transportation Plan. And in that plan, you might have seen that as what was called the unconstrained network. So it was a network full of fairly significant existing and planned active transportation facilities in the region. That plan was primarily bicycle focused, but it also did show shared use paths and other facilities for pedestrians as well. But was mostly focused on some of those higher level facilities that may have catered to bikes and the like. So as we work towards our 2050 RTP, one important part of that process is to update all the data that's part of CAMPO's planning work. And this bicycle and pedestrian facilities inventory is a key element of that. So we reached out to folks on the TAC and others in the jurisdictions that are part of CAMPO last year to just review any, new planning work that had been done, new data that had been created about active transportation. And so now we're reaching back out to the TAC to review their own jurisdiction on this online map viewer that you had a link to in the background paper that you received for today's meeting. So one thing to keep in mind is that, as a regional entity, we have both lots of jurisdictions to show in our mapping and a pretty high level to show that data at as well. So we decided to simplify some of the data or facility types within the data set to make it sort of coherent and legible as we tend to do. So, things like some jurisdictions might have something called protected bike lane or a buffered bike lane or a cycle track. We decided to just, make all those called bike facility in our main inventory map. We have a more detailed map that you'll see in the viewer as well that kind of breaks down that in a little bit more detail. But the lines that you see in the map may sometimes appear to be a little bit duplicative or nearly duplicative. So your help looking at this and assessing what needs to be shown, what should be removed, what is maybe being shown by multiple jurisdictions will be helpful in this process. So one of the other components of the RATP was this 2045 priority network. And it was created at that time to show where we could connect population centers to other high demand locations in the region. It had a tiered system that you see here on the right. We decided to try to give you guys a sense of what progress to that network has been completed since 2017. So we looked at both those tier 1 and tier 2 segments, and we analyzed what was now existing since 2017, or what is now existing in the new data we have. For the moment, you may identify some errors or have some feedback on this, but for now we show an additional 87 miles of the priority network on the ground since 2017. So I'm going to attempt to take us all to the viewer really quickly. Look at this. Right. So when you get into the online viewer here, you're brought to this welcome screen. It kind of gives you a sense of the purpose of the update and what we're asking you all to take part of and review here. So if you click enter, you'll get to the table of contents for the viewer. As you see, we have a lettered system here, and then up top, all of our tabs follow that same system. So we have first just the previous inventory from 2017 shown as is, with some bit of context. It might take some time as it loads, guys, but after that we have our updated inventory, which will also hopefully load quickly. Yeah, I do have a screenshot on the page too. But
And I think the bandwidth of hosting the TAC meeting might be slowing things down. Probably does not take this long.
Something.
You're using it.
Yep.
And everything there.
Here you go. So there's a lot of data in here, and thank you guys for producing all this data for us. So this is the main inventory, the updated inventory. It has on your right-hand side the legend, which shows you the different existing or planned facility types. And then below that, you can see all the layers that you can click on or off here, turn off the roads if we need it. And on the left-hand side, we have a bit of context, a bit of description of what's going on there. You close that out if you desire. Then each of the other tabs also have other maps on them that talk about, just as I went through here, both the status of some of those priority network facilities, and then again, more detail facility types for those who are interested, in both for bicycles and for pedestrians in the final tab there. Just so you know, we are aware of a few errors that we're beginning to correct. We know that particularly for the City of Austin's urban trail network, we had some that were showing up existing that weren't. We've made some corrections now, but having everybody take a look at your own jurisdictions, letting us know what you think of how they're displayed would be very helpful. So I'll go back to the presentation now. So what we're looking for, as I said, for everyone to take part of this is to make note of any errors, inconsistencies, disagreement with how things are being shown, perhaps, in the map. I'd like everyone to, as they can, send feedback to CAMPO by June 7th, which is a Friday. I think the preferred method for this, for sending back your comments, would be in a spreadsheet. Just make sure you include the name of the facility, the limits, what kind of edit you're requesting. You just have maybe one comment or something in an email, that would be fine as well. But a spreadsheet would be the preferred method if you have multiple things to make note of. And then obviously, if you have new GIS files to send us as well, if there's something that was missed in this process, please do send those over. We'll review them and get back to you all. So that's the presentation on this today. Have any questions at this time?
Thank you, Nick. Ed, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, it looks like we're not all the members have attended the meeting, and we sent out an email with this request so that others are aware that you have a deadline that's coming up and you want that review so that everybody gets opportunity to give you feedback.
So Ed, you're asking about other agencies? Is that what your question is?
Other TAC members that are not attending this meeting, like San Marcos and some of the others, I don't think they have a representative attend today's
Understood.
meeting.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, yeah, we can send out a notice, an email to the TAC membership, and then anybody that we also receive data from in this effort, just to make.
Yeah, Sean's on today.
Oh, I see.
But
yeah, we can. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, since we have the floor, but I wanted to welcome back Melissa McCullum, who had served previously on the TAC. Now she's at the City of Kyle. So welcome back, Melissa.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Anybody have any other questions or comments? That's good. So by June 7th,
This Bob, I have a hand up.
Go ahead, Bob.
It would be helpful when you send out the email, you mentioned a spreadsheet. If you would send it out in a way that we could simply forward your email, that it has included in the email all the information about where everything is that you'd like people to review, and the format of the spreadsheet that would make it easy for you to receive the data backend. So if you'll provide that edit spreadsheet, that would be great. And then that way we can forward it to perhaps some of our jurisdictions that haven't provided you information, and we can encourage them more easily to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Good, anybody else? Awesome. Thank you, Nick. We'll get that information to you by June 7th. So we'll go back to item 4, which is discussion on the 2050 regional transportation plan call for projects. And looks like Will's taking this one.
Thank you, everyone. Next slide, please. So at the February TAC meeting, I provided folks an update on the development of the 2050 RTP, including the purpose of the plan and the tentative timeline for development. For this information item, I'm going to focus on some of the things that project sponsors need to know for the upcoming call for projects period. The intake period for applications for the project call for the 2050 RTP is going to be open from June 17th to August 16th. That's approximately 9 weeks of time. Just a reminder, there's no funding directly associated with the RTP project call, but to be eligible for inclusion in the Transportation Improvement Program, a project first has to be in the RTP. So it's still an important step to take towards federal funding. I will be hosting a workshop covering the project call materials in depth in the coming weeks. In fact, tentatively slate that for Friday, June 7th. I'll be sending out an invite for that either tomorrow or the next day. But just know that this session really is focusing on some of the modifications to the process and the documentation for the project call. And we will cover other topics in more detail at that June 7th workshop. So next slide, please. So in the past couple of months, CAMPO staff has met with all sponsors of projects that were listed in the 2045 RTP, not just members of the TAC, but anybody that had a project in the 2045 RTP. We hosted these meetings to determine what projects could carry through to the 2050 plan versus what projects might need to reapply. We use that as an opportunity to explain the project call to folks. So this item shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody on the line right now. And we've now started to receive feedback from all the folks that we've met with. So thank you for those that have sent their materials back to us. And we'll be following shortly with those that haven't. Next slide, please. So for the rest of this information item, I'm going to cover some of the things that are included in the project call guidelines that were included as an attachment to the agenda. If you were around for the 2045 RTP project call, this document will look very familiar to you. It's very similar in terms of the instructions and guidelines, though I am going to cover some of the things that have changed, particularly related to the submittal process and application workbook, the goals and objectives that are related to the project selection criteria, and also the appendices and other resources that will be made available to potential project sponsors. Next slide, please. So regarding the submittal process, the application workbook is a spreadsheet. This would, if you were around for the 2045 RTP project call, you will be familiar with the spreadsheet that we use for the 2050 call. It'll be very similar. It will be posted on the CAMPO website. We have not put it up yet, but it will be made available in the coming weeks ahead of both the project workshop on June 7th and the opening of the project call on June 17th. Only minor changes really to this spreadsheet. So for project information, we are going to now require project sponsors to define regional significance for the definitions within the RTP. But beyond that, there are no changes to the project information. Also, there are no significant changes to the scoring criteria, and I'll get into that on the next slide. Next slide, please. We did review the goals and objectives that were used to determine the selection criteria for each project type with respect to different guidance from the federal government, including the federal planning factors, the emphasis areas from 2021, and planning focus areas from the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act. Our findings from the review of those items was that the previous goals and objectives were largely in alignment and only minor changes are really suggested. I'll go through those on the next slide. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you see half of the goals and objectives associated with the 2050 RTP. And the next slide will show the other half. The marked up red language are changes compared to the goals and objectives from the 2045 plan. So the changes for 2050, like I said, are relatively minor. On this slide, you can see some objectives related to mobility and stewardship have been changed slightly to reflect resiliency guidelines from the federal government. So specifically related to system redundancy and general promotion of system resiliency in the natural environment objective as well. Next slide, please. The other half of the goals and objectives, again, just a couple of changes here. One under the economic development objective to bring it in line with travel and tourism guidance from the federal planning factors. And then the evaluating communities and flexibility objectives, again, minor changes there to reflect IJA planning focus areas related to housing agency coordination and emerging technologies. Next slide, please. So some appendices and resources, some changes to this. So there will be several resources made available to potential applicants for the 2050 RTP project call. There will be a GIS map package and online viewer with the same information available, similar to the 2045 project call. We're still finalizing that viewer and map package, but that will be made available prior to both the workshop and opening of the project call. Another resource we plan to have that's new this time is a cost estimation tool for common roadway projects like extensions and capacity improvements, so widening or operational improvement projects. This tool will be optional to use, but it's just something that had been requested by members of the TAC to help out with the with their development of applications for the 2050 plan. Additionally, a revised index of resources by project selection criteria will be provided. So below is an example of what it might look like for one goal, the objectives, or sorry, the performance measures related to one goal area. Say, just an example for roadway projects. So each performance measure will have resources cited for it, including data, links to data that might be helpful for project or for applicants to the process, as well as the location of static maps that CAMPO has produced in reports that contribute to the 2050 RTP. Next slide, please. With that, just to wrap up some next steps here, the project call workshop again will be held on June 7th. I will be sending out invitations to that pretty shortly. Please forward that to anybody that you think would be valuable for them to attend, including other staff at your agency and consultants. It will be recorded in case anybody misses it. So it will be available after the fact as well to view. And then just reemphasizing, the project call intake period is going to be open from June 17th to August 16th of this year. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Will. Cole, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, I was trying to remember what was the board's involvement in identifying the goals and objectives of the 2045 plan.
So, Cole, I'll turn it over to some other folks that were here because I wasn't in this role at CAMPO at that point in time. But my understanding for the 2045 plan is that a subcommittee was formed to develop the goals and objectives for the 2045 plan, and that's ultimately what resulted in the goals and objectives for the 2045 plan.
So there was a subcommittee formed by the chair of the board, and they met at least twice, Williamson County. And then that subcommittee made a recommendation back to the full board, and the goals were adopted from that work. So anticipating the next question, we will be going back to the board in the fall to have them affirm again, or so we're going to show them what we've shown you, TAC, but also have them affirm whether they want to go through that process again or use the goals that are already in place that they.
Great. Ed, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I was wondering with the modeling that was done, I know the needle changes very slowly on roadway improvements, but was there an analysis done on, well, we have the 2045 plan and with the model showing? So, for example, if a 4-lane roadway now is projected because of land use and other factors, then maybe a 6-lane roadway might be needed in the future. Has an analysis been done on that to help local communities understand, some of those parameters and what they may want to, if they were going to submit a 4-lane roadway that may not meet the needs of the future, or that they would be able to say, well, we'll do a 4-lane roadway and phase in a 6-lane roadway in the future, but they need to get the right of way for that. Just wondering how the model could maybe help some of the local entities, and if you've been able to identify some of those situations. Hopefully that's understandable.
Thank you, Ed. One thing I'll say is that the draft 2050 model is available for viewing right now. We've developed a web app where you can view results, including volume to capacity ratios for the AM and PM peaks for both the base model, which is year 2020, and the and year 2050. That year 2050 scenario, correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, contains all the projects that were anticipated that were in the 2045 RDP. Yes. That's the no bill. And so we have that available for people to view right now through the online viewer. It will also be included in the web viewer that we're developing for the 2050 plan project call. And and so you can use that as a source of information. But after we receive all of the projects from local agencies, that will be put into the model to develop the adopted build models.
Yeah, thank you.
2050 also includes all the improvements to 35.
Okay.
Yeah.
As they were.
Yep. Sometimes a tabular form might work well because, I've worked with a model many decades and I still don't understand everything, how to interpret sometimes. So, something that a summary might be helpful, particularly for people who don't work with the model all the time. I'm not sure how it shows up on the mapping, but it would be good. It's probably not a lot of them, not a lot of corridors that need to be increased, maybe above what the 2045 plan is, but it'd be good to know those. And we may not be able to afford any of those improvements, but the plan is also used to reserve right of way, and I think that'd be important for our local partners to have that information as they develop their own local plans.
The way the information is displayed, Ed, is in terms of volume capacity ratio, which if you see, I mean, there are several different categories, several values that are seen from 0 to, I think, up to 1.5 VC, but anything above a VC ratio of 1 theoretically means that the demand is higher than the capacity. So if you see that on the map, then that's at least a good place to start looking. And that will be a web viewer, so it should be relatively user-friendly.
Okay, I just reiterate, sometimes we just don't have the time to do a lot of this, but to have that information available so they can discuss with local entities, can talk with CAMPO staff and kind of say, just to be aware of what possibly could be happening in the future.
Okay. Great. Cole, you had another question or comment?
Yeah. Do we anticipate there being a chance of goals and objectives changing after this project submittal process based on any discussions around our potential non-attainment status and what that would mean if we did, would we have the opportunity to iterate on our project submittal, or is this kind of like a one and done, will be done August 16th?
There's always a chance anything can happen. I mean, the board can do what it wants as far as that's concerned. As far as the potential non-attainment status, we won't even know whether or not that's a real possibility until 2027 at the absolute earliest. And we think that's an aggressive timeline. So, we will not have the tools available to us, or at that point of time to run anything on the new set of projects along with what was already carried over. So we would have no way of knowing what the impacts might be in terms of PM 2.5. Now, having said all that, if a non-attainment designation is made by EPA in 2027 or later, the plan can be amended and would have to be amended anyway, because then we would have to have a conforming plan and tip. So all of that would have to take place then anyway. So lastly, I'll respond by saying we are monitoring both the PM and other listed pollutants approved by Congress, and watching the monitors. It's our hope, because only one monitor went off, PM 2.5. It's our hope that between hopefully better weather conditions between now and 4 years, and the rolling average that they're going to do with the monitoring data, and whatever conversations TCQ has with EPA on what data to use and what mitigation factors may be necessary because of where the monitors are and what's going on around the monitors, we will make adjustments to that if we need to going forward. But we're watching.
Thanks, Ashby. Anybody else have any other comments or questions?
This is Charlie.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Well, hey, you mentioned regional significance, and if this is a question more for the workshop, I mean, I'm fine waiting, but you said basically that you would, the applicant would have to make its case, I guess, for the project being regionally significant. Let's say the determination by CAMPO is it's not regionally significant. Does that mean it's not in the plan? Is the plan only for regionally significant projects?
So, Charlie, first, I would like to say that just so, and also so everybody is aware, the regional significance criteria is carrying over from the 2045 plan. So what we'll be using for the 2050 plan is the same regional significance criteria that you saw for the 2045 plan. My understanding is that yes, to be in the plan, it does need to meet regional significance. The regional significance criteria, I do believe, however, if a project is federally funded through some other means and it doesn't technically meet regional significance criteria, it still can appear in the plan because it is federally funded. So that's the case with a lot of FTA funding, I think.
Yeah, depending on if somebody gets discretionary funding for something, depending on the rules of that particular program, it may have to be in the plan.
Correct.
But
So,
Charlie, generally
yeah.
the 2045 regional significance issue discussion was really sort of tied to the functional class.
Right.
And making sure that what we got were things that the board can legally fund. So, anything below, I think is minor arterial, they can't fund anyway. And so what was happening is the plan and the model was being clogged up with things that the board could never fund.
So I can't remember, was it major collector and above for the federal function?
I thought it was minor.
It's minor collector in a rural
Minor
area.
collector, okay.
Distinction between urban and rural. So you can do urban, but not rural.
Okay. So urban.
Yeah, I said arterial. Sorry about that, Charlie.
Yes.
Oh, that's
Collector. And I believe we do define regional significance as, generally speaking, of minor arterial and above for the RDP criteria. However, there are some caveats there. And if you look at the criteria list, you'll see that an exception can be made for for projects that connect regional centers. There's a whole appendix about that in the project called guidelines. Either connect regional centers or within a regional center. So there is for projects that projects that are not on a minor arterial or above, they can still be regionally significant, but that's where we want our project sponsors to define for themselves how it's regionally significant, because otherwise it's CAMPO staff that's interpreting it. So this just kind of keeps us from doing the interpretation for you. We can cover this in a little bit more detail within the workshop, and I will walk through all of the criteria, particularly for roadway projects in that workshop.
Okay, that's fine. One last question. I know concurrence was, requested last year between jurisdictions and agencies. If you're, placing a project in the plan, that still holds true. And then is it changed any? Is it just going to be a box on the spreadsheet that, yes, I've talked to the city of Austin, we agree, how is that to be met or shown to be met in the application? Or is it just a listing, here's what city of Austin, this county talked about, here's what Williamson County, Travis County talked about, your agreement on this list, or any idea on how you're going to request that?
Yeah. So, Charlie, this will be covered in the workshop.
Okay.
But generally, we would like to see some level of concurrence via email prior to application. And once in action, we're going to do both. We're going to ask that you do it prior, and then CAMPO will request concurrence after the applications have been submitted as well,
Okay.
after we've compiled the project list.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Charlie. Anybody else? Good. Okay, I think that takes us to report on transportation planning activities.
Oh, yeah, so just to report that the Regional Safety Action Plan is beginning work. And that we will soon be reaching out to a number of you folks here, be part of the county level task force. So look out for that invitation in the coming weeks. Yeah, we're excited to get that work started.
Fantastic.
Hey,
Go ahead.
this is Ryan Collins. Sorry, I've got just two announcements. One is that the mobile emission reduction plan was approved by the Federal Highway Administration last week. So we're looking to kick that off with the consultants probably in the next couple of weeks. But we'll be putting together a steering committee for that. So we'll be reaching out to certain individuals later in the summer, but just wanted to let everyone know. And I guess that kind of relates back to the attainment discussion earlier, because that is something we will be looking at in the mobile emission reduction plan. The only other announcement I had is that for the fall amendment cycle for the transportation improvement program, as well as it'll be the last amendment cycle for the 2045 regional transportation plan. Those applications are due on by June 12th, 2024. I know a couple of, I think TAG members have some applications that they've emailed me about. So if you can get those submitted, and we will get those processed. That's all I have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you
That's
so
all,
much.
that's all we have here.
Thank you. Okay, so then the TAC chair announcements would be that our next the next policy board meeting, is this right, June 10th?
So the June meeting
it's
has
gonna
been
be
canceled
August.
and June and July canceled, right?
The board?
Or yes, yes, June and
The
July
policy board.
meetings are canceled, so August is correct.
For now.
Yeah, for now.
For now, okay. And then our next TAC meeting on June 24th.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. With that, we'll adjourn. Oh,
Emily,
Charlie,
can I
go
ask you a
ahead.
question? Sorry, I should have got it in
You're
the
fine.
previous item. Ryan, at TASA project call, any update on that? Is it this
Oh,
not
no,
going to
the
be
task
this
force
summer?
call, yeah, I'm putting together information for that, but you'll see an information packet and an announcement in the next couple of weeks on that with a
Okay.
definitive schedule. That way y'all can start preparing projects over the summer. We'll do the readiness assessment in the fall, and then those that are considered ready will be evaluated in the spring. But yeah, putting those materials together now, so look forward to that soon.
But that also covers.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
thank
we
you.
plan on wrapping not just TASA, but carbon reduction funding in that as well. We still have a little bit of that as well. And the eligibilities, a lot of cross contamination there. So cross-pollination. We're towards more of the mind, but yeah. So, but we'll have probably around $30 million worth of TASA funding available, with an additional 10 in carbon reduction funding. So, as sponsors, just start thinking about what you might want to submit, and then we'll get that process going sometime during the summer.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Good. Anybody else? I think we're good. All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll adjourn at 2:59.